Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Then you know what happens? 6 years later, you find yourself singing Surrey with a fringe on top in front of Ira!
Okay, we're recording.
Welcome to
In Front of Ira.
This is the podcast where we still sit on my kitchen table and talk about romcoms.
Yeah.
And we're two historians.
I'm Torsten.
And I'm Sabrina.
And we're lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
And
I
that's
think
what
last episode we forgot to say our names. We're just gonna assume people know. But
we're just gonna do like a dub over. It's like, I'm Torsten.
It's like I've been watching too much Dropout TV and make some noise at an improv prompt where it's like two actors doing a scene and one of them is clearly been ADR. It's so stupid. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we're talking about Fire Island from 2022.
Yeah, recent.
Very recent. It's a rom-com that was produced by on Hulu. So over here, that means it's on Disney Plus, and it's directed by Andrew Ahn, who's done a few other indie movies mostly before. I mean, this still kind of counts as indie,
yeah,
sort of.
I mean, it's a 20th century, like that, very clearly at the beginning, like part of the intro.
And writer is Joel Booster, who also stars, and it also stars Bowen Yang, and I forget his name again that I wrote down. He was Bowen Yang's podcast co-host from Las Culturistas.
Oh, that's why he seems so familiar.
Yeah, what is it, Matt Rogers, I think, and then Margaret Cho is in it as the lesbian. The token lesbian.
Lesbian Mrs. Bennett. Let's talk about what this is basically.
So Fire Island is basically gay adaptation of, once again, Pride and Prejudice.
By way of Clueless. Like, I think there's a lot of Clueless references.
I mean, Clueless is Emma, so it's mostly like...
Yeah, I'm saying by way of Clueless, because Clueless isn't the direct Emma. Like, they're playing with this.
It's also interesting that I think this is a much closer Pride and Prejudice adaptation of Bridget Jones.
It has even going to the other person's house, parties, class thing.
There's
very clearly
scene in the rain, the confrontation, and so on. So basically, Joel Booster's character is Elizabeth Bennet. Conrad Camorra is Darcy.
Yeah. What's his name? William.
I think so. And then
is Darcy named William? I'm such an Austin
Mark
rude.
Darcy.
Mark Darcy. Wait, hold on. Wait, is that actually his name in Pride and Prejudice as well?
Completely blanking now, Mr. Darcy.
I downloaded all the.
His name is Mr. First.
It's Mr.
All the Jane Austen fangirls and members are gonna kill us.
Sorry.
Anyway, no, and Bowen Yang is Elizabeth Bennet's sister, and I mean that's also kind of reference, right? It's also clearly. So the cool thing that this does is obviously not only is it a gay film, it's very much also about the gay Asian American community and talks about that quite a bit. So they're the sort of the whole thing where Pride and Prejudice is obviously about class and social class. He kind of Joel Booster does this via sort of the class system within the gay community where no Asians and there's a lot of anti-Asian racism within the gay community and also why him and Bowen Yang are kind of almost sisters because they also bonded, so they worked at the same brunch place as waiters and obviously bonded over the fact that they're both Asian American gay men again Conrad Camorra is Filipino, so he's in that too, and Margaret Cho and some of the other supporting players are not Asian American, but it's clearly very much trying to speak to that specific intersectional experience, I think.
Yeah, because all the other the rich gay guys are all kind of white, very, very kind of almost to the point of parody exactly the kind of rich white gay
so it is also still about actually social class, the money, but also specifically within sort of the racist hierarchies. And so it is set on Fire Island, as the title says, which is obviously
Would have been
known as
really surprising if it was
gay
not.
enclave of like for decades now, that this is like specifically sort of the gay village part of it, where a lot of gay men mostly go for the summer. And sort of the mother Bennett is Margaret Cho, who bought a house there because she made a fortune eating glass in an Italian American, so probably Olive Garden. And then, but as we find out very quickly, she actually mostly lost all of this money by now, so she will have to sell this house.
She's
and
not
buy
good with money. She was like an early investor in Quibi,
Quibi?
which is one of the lines that made me laugh out loud. It's so dumb.
Yeah, but it's also very specific because when this film was first pitched, it was supposed to come out on Quibi, which was Jeffrey Katzenberg's failed streaming service. And so so this is also why when this was first developed, it didn't go anywhere, and then it took a few years, and now it ended up on Hulu,
which is just as nonsensical named streaming service as Quibi. So it feels like it just comes full circle.
But so basically this gay friend group goes to Fire Island and then meets this other gay friend group that is the rich kids, and Joachim Booster's character is very invested in getting his sister, quote unquote, laid this weekend. Obviously, a bit different sensibility than Jane Austen, where it's about marriage rather than getting laid.
But it is. I mean, it is very like it's very close. There's one point in which it is not very much like ironically the thing that I like least about this movie is where it strays the farthest from Jane Austen, which is that it kind of it almost invests you as much in the romance of Bowen Yang as it does Joachim Booster, and that sometimes feels like it kind of wanders off the path. And I kind of just think it's because if you have Bowen Yang, you're not going to not use Bowen Yang.
Yeah, but it's also, I think, supposed to be two different types of like gay dating and queer dating, because like Joachim Booster character is constantly very much about like monogamy is a curse and he doesn't want to be monogamous. And even by the end, when of course he gets together with his Mr. Darcy, the Sorley one Gamora, they're still kind of ending it on this more open thing in a way. Like, oh, he also says like monogamy may not be for me, but like this is just a dance now in the end and we'll see where this is gonna go. Whereas I think Bowen Yang and then this Charlie character.
You mean JFK?
Sort of the gay JFK.
I mean, just JFK.
FK, yeah. Is the more like he also says like he's actually interested in romance. He's actually interested in monogamy. He doesn't just want to get laid. This is not something he actually does come to Fire Island for. He comes like everyone else comes there to get laid. He comes to be with his community and his specific friend group because he also moved away. They mostly see each other now. Like he moved to California, so they see each other now when they go there and so on and so forth. So I think so for that, it makes sense that they have the one with the more romantic grand gesture.
I think it makes sense, but it does, to me, for a time, I was like, wait, are we doing Pride and Prejudice or are we not doing Pride and Prejudice? Because we're very invested in this part of the movie.
In a way, I mean, still having, not read much of Jane Austen, but it also is, it often has similar sensibilities as Shakespeare had before, where you often have sort of the two couple structure, that kind of
that's
thing.
What I mean. So, but like to me, that's kind of like an A-B story, like a 2/3, 1/3 thing. And this felt 50-50 split. And again, it works. It's not like it drags anywhere except in the never mind.
No.
It's just that I think the kind of the way that usually a movie kind of takes your hand and tells you this is the A story, this is what we're constantly, and like the way that that's cut together, it emphasizes the A story more. And these are basically even. I don't know. I haven't looked didn't sit there with a stopwatch, but I saw a lot of Bowen.
I think some of the problems of probably also the original like Pride and Prejudice and the way of like, of course, there's been great Pride and Prejudice adaptations, so on and so forth. So maybe that like there's so much of like that misunderstanding has to happen between them. And like, I mean, with Bridget Jones, it's sort of solves it because it's a love triangle structure, but you need to fill the time of like them just having misunderstandings. If that's just the point, you need to like do something So I think that other couple, and then it's probably just like, oh, we have Bowen Yang, we want to use Bowen Yang.
Which is not wrong. Like he is, we talked about in our last episode how you can sometimes just tell a romantic comedy by like people being funny in it, like pratfalls and physical comedy. And there's a scene when kind of like he's almost at his lowest, Bowen Yang.
Yeah, but he's high, so he
But he's high,
decent
and then he falls sideways into a pool, and it's such good comedic acting.
But before that, when he's high,
in the chair,
the Charlie, this guy he wants to get with, like his ex, like the mean friend group threw in his love interest ex. He's like, and he's in the chair, and it's like, oh, what is it like on the floor? It's the new sitting in a chair, like that, because he's high off his face. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because you can sort of expect, again, it's very close to the plot of Pride and Prejudice in the sense of like all these kind of intrigues between social class and like again wanting to date within your social class, and particularly this one rich mean friend group being very invested in that, and like the thing that it reminded me the most of was 10 Things, because that has the same kind of like, we're doing Shakespeare, we're doing something old that's been done like a lot of times, we're doing it in a very specific way. This one doesn't entirely do the thing. They don't have like constant lines from Pride and Prejudice, but it starts off with the starting line from Pride and Prejudice, him doing that in the voiceover. So it does have I felt the sensibility was very close to that. Yeah. The sense and sensibility.
Sensibility.
So also the voiceover, by the way, so it opens with the classic rom-com voiceover that doesn't come back for most of the movie.
Again, yes.
Until that one moment when sort of in the downfall of like everything is sort of fucked up, then this briefly it comes back.
This is again a thing. Please. Every time. Please commit to the voiceover. Oh, don't do it. I'm like, so annoyed.
You do so much like set up and so much like you cram so much backstory into these voiceovers, and then you completely abandon it because you don't know.
Because it just feels like somebody came in and said like, you're gonna have to explain these 4 things, everything else is fine, and I'm like, fine. The other thing that also kind of bugs me, since we're talking about like that comes right before the opening voiceover, is the kind of meta commentary on the 20th Century Fox logo, where it's kind of almost starts off like a director's commentary, where like it literally sounds where they sing the tune, which is fun, but again, nothing like that ever comes back. And I would have at least wanted that in the end.
The very end of the credits, they count down to the end of the credits, like they do with the Suns.
It's more like a callback to what happened actually in the movie than like the meta commentary. Again, this is very minor stuff that nobody cares about. But I loved that, and I'm like, this is great, and I kind of was like waiting for that to come back.
Yeah. I feel like they almost all abandoned this at the time. Like, I mean, even Bridget Jones, which can go off the diaries, like, doesn't use it as much as you would think. And like,
but it does come back.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not too much to ask to just like throw us like a little bit of voiceover here and there.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. So I think it's uses, so what I like about it, uses location obviously very well, because you have that very specific location of Fire Island. You can do a lot with it. And I mean, it's mostly people's houses, but you have a way of like, oh, these are the fancy summer houses, the summer residences, which, you know, is a trope in like,
the fancy lawyers had that spaceship house, which is nuts.
And you have the beach, and you obviously like the pivotal scene in the rain where they like kiss, and it's like the enemies to lovers moment that they recreate here, which is great. Chris Summer storm on the island, and because they're gay, they come from an underwear party, so that's what. And yeah, I think it's a fun movie. It's one of those movies where I'm like, to a certain point, it's still almost unbelievable the movie got made, and I think it only got made more because streaming exists, because it's a more niche audience that you can, because no big studio, like we talked about Bros being the first like proper big studio gay rom-com, and obviously they had to be white in it. And to do such a specific movie that speaks to so many, like not only the gay community, but the Asian American gay community, and to do this with the sensibility, somebody needs to take a shot, and I think they're much more willing to take a shot for this kind of thing. So again, like it would have made sense for this, like, oh, we're launching this new streaming service, and this is one of those things where we kind of like want to show we do diverse content or whatever. And I'm glad that it didn't die there, and then it's got to go through like.
It's kind of sad though, but because I think the rom-com as a genre, we've talked about this before, except if it stars for some reason Sydney Sweeney, is not going to be a thing that they really put in cinemas at all these days, which is unfortunate.
To be fair, for some reason Sydney Sweeney, in that case, we have to give her credit because she just founded her own production company and put her own money into it, and like. Just did it.
I mean, it's fair. We said what we said about that movie.
Yeah. Like I mean, I think that is literally the thing. Like, who has the power to do this? And at least, I mean, they can, but they couldn't still get this through anything. I think there's enough of like, okay, well, you know, Joel Booster sort of, and then Bowen Yang is enough of a name and a certain niche, right? But he's still, I mean, he was just in Wicked, but this is before Wicked as well. But even there, like nobody thinks Wicked, and then there's immediately, oh, Bowen Yang, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, it's like, so the SNL, there's also the bit where they actually talk about the gays in space, recurring sketch in the meta part in SNL. I found an interview where they like, where they talked about it, like that, whether or not this would feel too like masturbatory is how he phrased it to do SNL. It's like, no, that's precisely why. And apparently that scene was even much longer, and they kind of cut it down. So like, and... Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
it also has Nora Ephron level dialogue in it. We both basically laughed out separately and texted each other at the scene where
he thinks Lindsey Graham was in the Parent Trap.
It's basically the. I asked her where she was when Kennedy was shot, and she said Ted Kennedy.
Although I think in this case, I mean, the sensibility is also about not just like. Obviously, there it's less about age; it's more about like social class and like dealing with politics differently. And like, I mean, they're the same age, right? Or is he that much? He's not that much younger.
Yeah, they're not that much different. But it's like a class thing.
It's a class thing. It's like they don't need to worry about fucking Lindsey Graham because they're rich and white. Like, you know,
I'm 100% sure that was a reference point. Like,
sure, like that kind of thing.
My favorite part then after that is Bowen Yang basically going like, Lindsey Graham in the Parent Trap. I would
watch that. That is probably an ad lib. Like that whole thing feels like riffing a little bit too, which you would do, I think. Which I would also imagine if you're Joel Booster and you like cast Bowen Yang, you kind of let him do that a little bit, or like you do that together. And then obviously again, if you have like Bowen Yang's podcast co-host, which is also something that's sort of meta reference when I can't find him. I don't know where he went. Man, we wanted to do a podcast together. Which like of course is also like
I did not get that because I didn't put that together.
Yeah, but also I think it works outside of knowing that for like us, of course it's like the thing like, now people do
all annoying people do podcasts.
People who have like a friend they want to hang out with and find stupid reasons.
Don't give away the game. Why are you giving away the game?
Start a podcast, and to be fair, their podcast has become very successful now because they have industry connections. That especially lately, I think that now that Bowen Yang is becoming more and more of an household, and they have had bigger.
They had some viral moments on that. The whole like. Who was it? One like a very relatively famous actress who like was there when Jimmy played the violin for Jimmy Carter as a kid or something. Like that was like a moment that she shared on the podcast, and like the internet went like, what?
Yeah,
that was, and I
recently, like I feel like right now I keep seeing more and more of it because more and more big names are on it. So they just had Gaga on it.
Yeah.
And had like a big touching moment because apparently Bowen Yang, I didn't know this, came out at some point when he was younger, but then went through actual conversion therapy. And then when he was in like university, had another like coming out. And that was around the time. So he like the what's his name now? Matt Rogers, his podcast co-host, both of them met at NYU. And I think around that time he had like a second proper coming out, and was when Born This Way, like Lady Gaga's Born This Way, and so like he told her that essentially.
How old is Bowen Yang? Is he like late 30s, 40s?
I want to say he's not that much. Like he's between us, I think. So a lot of the actors in this movie are younger than me, even, which is always depressing by now. Like a lot of I
not
looked
gonna
this
get
up,
better.
but a lot of the the guy who plays Charlie is like born in 1990, so he's also younger than me.
Okay, wow.
November 6th, 1990. So he's almost a year younger than me. Yeah. No, but I mean that makes sense. Like on Born This Way, it was kind of, yeah, if he had like a second coming out sort of in his early 20s, which would make sense. If you like, yeah. And yeah. No, and Amelia de Moldenberg was just on our podcast too. Has a whole bit where she's like talking about going out with a magician.
Oh yes, I saw that. Yeah.
But anyway, I think, yeah, it has really funny dialogue because you have people that know how to write funny dialogue. I think ironically at some point, and I don't know if that might have been in the time around the time they were promoting the movie or just generally, I remember on social media or like even a bigger media publication, like there was a picture of Joel Kim Booster and it kept confusing him with Bowen Yang, and it was that exactly thing of like, oh, they're both gay and Asian, which like it directly speaks to what the movie is also talking about, right? Like the specific racism with
which really, like, this is one of the things of like you put them next to each other. The only reason you'd confuse them is because you like mentally put them in the same like.
Because you're like mentally you're like a gay and Asian.
Yeah, basically.
Exactly, because you're just being discriminatory. They look nothing alike. But yeah, and I mean, they also have that sleazy character in there that keeps hitting on either on and goes, "Oh, you look Korean, you look Filipino," and like,
the guy with the
Jesus
mustache, yeah.
fucking Christ.
Oh my god.
And I mean, I feel like this is still toned down, probably because they didn't want to like. They wanted to keep the overall tone of the movie relatively light, but like the bullshit.
There is some serious stuff in there.
It is in there, but I think like in terms of the bullshit they would have to hear on a regular basis, it's not even covered in that. I do appreciate Margaret Cho as like the lesbian, well, the older lesbian.
It's I like it because she first gets like basically also introduced as kind of like this little bit out of touch, out of time. Like she hangs out with these young dudes, and then you kind of like get a real kind of backstory where she really says like, I had a life before this kind of life.
And I think, yeah, I mean, she also makes sense as a character. She's been around for a long time as a stand-up comedian and so on and so forth. So it kind of also feels like that. I would assume that since she's that much older, for somebody like Bowen Yang, she was somebody to look up to in terms of, oh, this is a queer Asian American person doing comedy, and like, you know, when there's still almost nobody that looks like me.
She would have been around then in like the 2000s.
Yeah, and now remember she pops up on Sex and the City sometimes.
Yeah, that's
so
that works.
Sort of like late 90s, early 2000s sensibility, and she's bi, actually. So I looked this up, and there's a really fun quote of hers about that, and in Wikipedia, on her Wikipedia page, where she's like, so like, I'm bisexual, and like, I still don't know if that's like the correct word for, because I don't think there's only two genders and there's like a spectrum of gender, and I've been attracted to all people like on the spectrum of gender. So technically, probably pansexual is the word, but I like using bisexual because it's kind of 70s. Like, that's so relatable. And like, I'm sitting in a court shirt.
Yeah, corduroy,
brown
like, corduroy.
and I'm like, yes, I too would like to actually use bisexual because
and the horn rimmed glasses.
The older political term. And so I get that. And I also don't think there's only two genders. Like, that would also, like, that would be very weird given my dating history. But yeah, so like, she's sort of it makes sense. She's sort of an icon in that regard. She's been around for a while and speaks to those communities. And funnily enough, there was, because poor Alison Bechtel got asked again because this doesn't pass the Bechdel test, even though she has said herself 50 million times that this was a thing she made up for a comic strip and it's not a measurement of anything per se. She actually, because they asked her, like, what do you think? That like no other women talking to women in this. And she's like, well, you know, it is specifically about the gay male Asian American, like mostly gay male in American community. So it does an important service to this community. So maybe that doesn't matter.
Yeah, like do you need another woman in there who like for 3 seconds talks to Margaret Cho about the
just
weather? Is
the
that
weather,
necessary?
like
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, what else do we
Yeah,
like about
it's funny because like we're not really talking about the plot, and I think the reason is because it's Pride and Prejudice, and
Yeah,
it's the way
so-
that it's kind of very kind of almost paint by numbers. Like you take Pride and Prejudice, you take the different chapters, and then there's like, okay, we can leave these out, and the other ones get scenes basically that we transfer to like the like it's not
So-
the different social
Friend
classes.
group goes to Fire
Yeah.
Island, meets the other snotty friend group. Joel Booster wants to set up Bowen in with this one guy that makes eyes at him from the beginning, this guy Charlie, and then this
JFK.
is and this is how this sits over, and like obviously those groups kind of clash. There's a guy called Dexter comes in that is obviously kind of an asshole, but like he's the Daniel Cleaver if we want to talk about it in Bridget Jones terms. He's this sleazy guy with a past who kind of wants to make Joel Booster believe that like the Darcy hates him for reasons that aren't why
Yeah,
he hates him.
which that's actually a thing that quote unquote Darcy. I kind of didn't quite get Darcy. I keep saying Darcy. Okay, he's Darcy, William, because he warns Joel Kim Booster's character Noah. He warns him, but he doesn't go into specifics. And I feel like when you kind of get to the point of the kind of thing that he does, I feel like you could have been more specific there. Like I feel like you could have been clearer.
But he also says it's not my story to tell, so it implies that so we find out so that sleazy guy ends up fucking one of the other friends and then films it and puts that film online without his consent, or at least the consent is murky because they were high. And
if it's out online and he's making money off it, if there's not like
so he's an OnlyFans
a contract signed or something, that's just not
porn essentially as porn without his consent. And so they kind of like obviously scare him into deleting all of this, and so because or Darcy basically he's a lawyer, and that becomes and in the beginning is like sort of lawyers are all evil, but then he gets to use his lawyer powers to kind of scare the guy into taking the content down, and it's like a very obviously satisfying moment, and we get the idea that another friend of his this has happened to, and
which I mean I feel like you could have been a little bit more specific as to like, trust me, he's not a good guy. Like I feel like,
but I think that is the Pride and Prejudice sensibility. You need to solve this mystery.
Like we can never say we're British. We can never say things as they are.
What I actually like about it is they even use the letter, right? Because that is a very important plot point that he sends Elizabeth Bennet a letter confessing, sort of, like apologizing and like showing a different side of him, and they get to do this because early on in the movie our Elizabeth Bennet's iPhone breaks because it falls into the pool. So like, and which is cool because again, I mean, we know this, like with newer movies, there's so many plot lines of like misconnections or things you can no longer do because we're all constantly available with our smart. Why did you not just fucking text us?
Which honestly, like real people might not do for various reasons, but like in the movie, you're just kind of like, why don't you?
So he gets left behind at the party, so they get to have the scene in the thunderstorm. His friends get on the last water taxi, and then he has to find him and that kind of thing. And in that case, they literally would have just been, hey, we're like on this, like come after whatever. But he doesn't have a phone, so that doesn't happen. And of course, he could have done the thing of like, oh, the network doesn't work on the island or whatever. But that's also unrealistic because it's fucking Fire Island and a lot of rich gay people live there. They would have erected the mast themselves.
Like this super popular vacation spot where many people come to has for some reason no coverage.
It makes more sense that as someone who doesn't have a lot of money bricks his old iPhone and can't replace it.
That is also a great line where they say like, well, do you have Apple Care? I'm like, what point of me having an iPhone 6 Plus in 2022 makes you think I have Apple
Care? And then also, I mean, I don't know if there's not an Apple store in Fire Island, but
although I mean,
no, I think
touristy spot, Apple store. Get that money.
Apparently, there's a grocery store that you see them go to that also actually exists because it's like the grocery store has everything including Loop. You just go there for
Where
everything.
the guy complains that what is it, like Triscuits or something, that the grocery store is
Cheez-Its, I
being Cheez-Its, the grocery store is being homophobic because they charge $4 more for the
This is like,
Cheez-Its.
I don't make the choices. Yeah. No. Yeah. What was it? Oh, I also love this when they just have arrived and it's like, oh, they're at a party and everyone is on Grindr, and then it's like, I'm not sure, it's like, or something. I think this is what gay liberation would have wanted for us, and then it's like, yeah, except for the Charlie XCX remix or something like that.
No, like I think he says like that's exactly what it wanted for us. And which like honestly, like the songs, like it's funny because like it's a recent movie and I didn't expect songs that are so relatively recent to just pop up on it, and you're like, oh yeah, there's the Charlie XCX song, there is
the
I
other one
wrote
I
another
knew
one.
and then
Hold on.
forgot to look up because it was like, oh, what was that?
Boys one is the
Boys is
Charlie
Charlie
XCX,
XCX.
and then there's, hold on, I have this somewhere. This is me.
But it also makes sense because obviously it's the gays. You need
Petrus.
you need the newest.
Which was a great scene. Like
we also got to have a moment where a drag queen pops up, so it also ticks certain boxes of what you want to put in there.
Yeah, which I'm trying to think because I feel like that whole spiel is also reflecting on a scene in Pride and Prejudice, and I can't think of it now, like what the equivalence is.
No, I think
I'm gonna kill him. I said that. It's
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about some lines because, like, I
mean, we already had Lindsey Graham, Parent Trap.
The Lindsey Graham is on another one which directly references popular culture, and basically the guy not knowing the pop culture that you're supposed to know is when he says, "You legally blonded him," and then he replies, "I don't know what that is."
And way harsh tie, which is the direct Clueless quote. And yeah, I mean what it also like, which is like when they're on the beach, and I mean they keep constantly asking, like, did you already fuck? And like Bowen Yang and that Charlie guy, and then it's like, well, I gave you access to my room for like 27 uninterrupted minutes. What the hell did you do? Please don't tell me you did a puzzle, and it obviously cuts to them doing a puzzle.
And he says like 27 minutes is not enough time to do a puzzle.
But also, I mean, that also feels like it's a funny thing of like the Victorian age kind of sensibility, where obviously people weren't allowed to have sex before marriage, or like obviously they did, but like
you
in
have
those
like
classes
your
you were not
chaperone
and you were chaperone and all of that, and you probably were actually like put in a room and then we're doing a puzzle, even though they're doing it.
I liked the part in the middle where they go to all these parties on drugs, and it's basically a nice PSA, kind of like what all kinds of drugs do.
Yeah,
like,
and if you take
just kind of like,
that, and
this is what's going to happen, that's going to happen.
And I mean, if you are in that scene as a gay person, you know all of this. I think this is also explaining to the audience if someone isn't doing this, or is like also obviously like recognizes certain things. Or the friend who finds himself incredibly attractive in the mirror because of that. So yeah.
Oh yeah, and there's a reference to Say Anything when Bowen says I'm standing outside the window with the boombox.
Because he wants to describe.
He says, "I want the romance bullshit."
The romance bullshit, and no, I don't know what else do we have.
There's an interesting part where they have like a long discussion about the authorial oeuvre of Alice Munro, and that was clearly written before the recent things came to light, which I did not remember, and Carrie pointed out that and I'm like, oh yeah, right, that was Alice Munro, because like some of them getting to know each other kind of like hinges on like exchanging information about like Alice Munro.
And it's like, oh, the only people on this island who actually brought a book to read, that kind of thing, which is and also like a class indicator type thing, even though they're from different social classes.
I love another thing that I loved was the kind of like nerdy guy that they're with, who basically is kind of like appalled at people like having sex outdoors because of Lyme disease. And then like a plot point is that the ex has Lyme disease.
It's like, yeah, I mean, that's actually true. I mean, other than like having sex on the beach is very inconvenient because of all the sand. You also don't want Lyme disease.
It really don't want Lyme disease.
But
Really waiting for that vaccine.
But that's also what Fire Island is known for. So that actually does pop up in like Fellow Travelers, that show that's basically set throughout the whole Cold War and like the gay relationship, like Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey. There's also an episode where in Fire Island because they're really also trying to tick all boxes of like queer queer history or like gay male history of the like post-war history essentially mostly. And yeah,
I really liked because it kind of gets real at some point in the scene between William and Noah where Noah is basically just kind of throwing all his complaints out at our Darcy, at William, and his reply is just kind of picture perfect, where he says, "The reality is, Noah, no one's thinking that much about you," which I just thought was like such a good kind of, because he is the rom-com main character, like he has literal main character syndrome, and for somebody to throw back at him like most people aren't really thinking about you, right? You are an important. It's a kind of like the Ally McBeal thing. Why are your problems the most important ones? Because they're mine, right? And I really like that this was actually a topic of discussion, and like that the person that he's interested in is actually very much aware of this, that this person is kind of making things about him that aren't really about him.
And I mean, he also needs to learn that like trying to force his idea of like relationships and dating and so on his like quote unquote sister doesn't work. And I mean, this is also what like Margaret Cho's character is trying to tell him when they're watching like Bowen, like, and is like, you know, like he's fine, you know, you don't need to save him or you need to set him up or you don't need to do all of this. He's gonna find his own way and he's gonna be okay. And then Bowen also gets itself like say that again. It's like, I want the romance bullshit, let me have the romance bullshit, and I will find somebody who wants that too. And then he does, and he gets the grand gesture.
He does get the grand gesture, although I feel like that's undercutting the whole scene because he kind of gets goaded into the grand gesture. Like they're basically egging him on to do the grand gesture. The guy.
Yeah, but he's like, I want to do something. But it also feels like, I felt like that was a meta thing because in reality, he could have just like called it. Because like, what do I do? Call him. But like it doesn't translate to film if he's just like, it's boring. It's like he could text him like, hey, I'm really sorry. Can we meet up in the city? Or like, can you wait and I'll come after you? Or like, you know, it's just anticlimactic. So you won the big rom-com thing.
It's Harrison Ford flying to France on the Concorde in the Sabrina remake is basically what it is. Like, this is not a thing that makes sense, but there is a way you could technically get him to that point, and it's much more visually interesting that
exactly way. So like stealing the water taxi, that there's a very
stole a boat from me.
There's an angry lesbian on here.
He's like, are we finally gonna go to like what Terry's
Cherry Grove or something? Yeah, well, I guess it's a lesbian hangout spot.
It's oh yeah, the again the kind of like the cultural differences, the way that they're pointing this out, because like the guy, it's not just like SNL. Like at some point the JFK that was
that is that character. I'm just gonna JFK.
He basically,
that's such a good drag king name. It's my drag king name. Jesus Christ. I'm gonna post this after. Like, my new drag king name is JFK.
Oh my god.
Which is not even true, because it should be JFK, but that doesn't make any sense.
But like who at some point realizes that like these people are kind of like snarky and funny in like the way that like comedians are, and asks them, do you know who Amy Schumer is?
It's like, yes, unfortunately we do.
But it's really well. It's because like to me it's like it's weird to not know who Amy Schumer is, but most people in my life probably don't know who Amy Schumer is. Like, right? That's kind of like there's a not even that I'm like a huge Amy Schumer fan. It's just like a basic level of knowledge that you have in order to navigate the world, and that's yeah.
I don't know, in terms of ratings. So This is a 6.7 IMDb, so it's the standard. Like
Like,
the
what are we
rom-com.
gonna do here?
Funnily enough,
That's
almost
more. That's
exact
more than
same-
Say Anything.
No, Say Anything at 7.7.
Oh, sorry.
But the Rotten Tomatoes viewer rating is 67%, but the critics rating was 94.
Mhm.
And I guess that makes sense because I feel like this is one of those movies where it's already catering to, like, this is made by people who are, it's a clearly, again, this sort of intellectual New York comedy scene. So it is very much in that Nora Ephron thing of like, it has to be your thing and there's certain references you have to get, and it is trying to do the Pride and Prejudice. I think if you're not aware that this is doing Pride and Prejudice, this might actually fly over your head completely, and then you might not understand why a
Mhm.
plot unfolds a certain way. And I'm not saying like that the average viewer isn't smart enough or something, but it's still a very specific. It's trying to do a very specific thing for a very specific group of people, or several groups of people, but that overlap in certain ways in terms of what their cultural references are, right? And yeah, so I think that.
Do we have taglines, actual taglines?
I didn't find any, which is not super surprising because it's a streaming film, and like taglines are a thing of old that you put on posters, and yeah.
I have a fake one though, which
Me too.
I like.
Maybe it's the same.
Maybe it's the same one. It's
What?
entirely possible it's the same
What is
one.
it?
It's not just Pride, it's also Prejudice.
Yeah, I just had it's Pride
Okay, yeah.
and Prejudice, which I mean, I'm sure
minds.
that like they had that
Great minds
from-
go to the obvious thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, like that would be a fair tagline if they had one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, anyway, I think it's one of those movies that I feel like I've heard people talk about, but it probably still doesn't have the exposure that it should have. So
It's
if you
on
are
Disney Plus here, it's on Hulu in the States. Who's gonna see that? Like, it's people
yeah, and
who
also
will
here
make
Disney
a point.
Plus, like people always miss that Disney over here has so much content that comes through Hulu and Star and has like quote unquote adult.
So people watch like
content.
Star Wars and Disney movies on Disney Plus. That's mostly
And yeah, so like go see it if you can. I mean, there's probably a physical release by now.
It is pretty funny. Like, I think
And
that's
it's a
the
nice thing. And also, like, hey, either if you are queer, it's definitely one of those you should have seen, because again, we don't get that many anyway. But also, if you're not, I mean, hey, maybe it just, you might learn something.
Also, just like
You
watch
know,
anything that Bowen Yang is in.
Exactly.
Just like, why not?
Exactly.
I mean, again, I will reiterate the scene where he's sitting in the much too large chair where he's high.
Mhm.
Peak of comedy, and the scene where he falls sideways into the pool, which comes at a low point for him. It's not kind of meant to be funny, I think, but it's Bowen Yang, so it is funny. It's a pretty funny movie, and it's romantic. So I think we can say this one is a romantic
I think it's
comedy.
a nice one to like watch in the summer as well. I feel like because it's at like Elton Island, it's like
Yeah, it's not a Christmas rom-com.
No, if you need like, and it's only 1 hour 40 minutes.
Although,
short movies, and
again,
it could have still been a bit shorter even, but at least you're not gonna sit there and have to invest 2.5 hours.
I felt about this the same way I felt also about Say Anything. I always feel like, yeah, could have shaved off another 10 minutes, like for that 90-minute, like kind of compact rom-com experience, which again, Say Anything wasn't a rom-com, but yeah.
Yeah, I think for that ultimately there's a few too many strands that you do still want to bring together. Like, I mean, I feel like between there's two romance plot lines, you need to have, if you want to stick to Pride and Prejudice, you have the plot with the twist of like, this is a sleazy guy, why is he a sleazy guy, we need to resolve this. And then you also want to give Margaret Cho at least something else to do and sort of like bring her back in a way that makes sense, and also kind of wrap up the thing with the house being sold, which isn't per se wrapped up, but like that has to also have sort of an emotional beat at the end again of like, oh, maybe this is our last summer here, and what does that mean? And no, actually it's about the friendship and we can have that elsewhere. So I think there is, to be fair enough to wrap it up, you can always find 5
it's not
minutes.
Again, it's not a slow movie. It's just my problem with the pacing is kind of not so much the clip of it, but the fact that the kind of the Pride and Prejudice B story, if you want this to be Pride and Prejudice, gets emphasized way more.
I mean, that's maybe also one of those things we had different cuts, and then somebody, I mean, it's still Hulu, but there's still executives, and somebody might have said, make it a little bit more rom-com.
Yeah, or
Like,
or
there
like
was
put
stress.
Bowen Yang in more of that
Yeah,
because
or
he's a
that,
star.
like
Like
that
that's
kind of
entirely
thing. And then
possible.
you have different cuts of things. It was like, oh, okay. Or you had too many things where there were too many funny lines, and that's where you left the scene in, and you're kind of attached to it. I mean, it also has that sensibility of like, and I think they said this somewhere. I mean, it's one of those things you throw out there when you do promo, but I can't believe it about that, where it's sort of gay summer camp. And you end up having this group of people that you all know and love, and you're just having too much fun making it, and then have a hard time cutting bits and pieces, because you're like, sometimes if it's your baby, you want to leave certain things in, maybe if they don't fully serve the plot, but there's like this one shot or this one scene, and if you cut that one actor doesn't have more lines. So I think sometimes that's how we end up with too long cuts, and I think I'm more forgiving of it if it's an hour and 40 and it's not 2:20.
Sure. I mean, it's the general streaming issue, right? Like you could have had a 45-minute TV episode, but this one is an hour 10 because we not really paying extra money for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes 45 minutes would have been enough. It's not way too long. If you can start it and within under 2 hours you can be done, even if you have to pause it to, like pick up some snacks, it's fine.
It's a good watch. Anyway, check it out.
Yeah.
Fire Island. And now I really want to go to Fire Island, even though, I mean, I'd probably have to. There apparently seems to be the lesbian spots, so.
I mean, Margaret Cho might be there.
Yeah. Cool. Or JFK. Anyway, yeah, I think that's that.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.